Welcome back to the deep dive. So, if you're like most people, your brain is constantly generating this background hum of worry or criticism or maybe regret.
Hmm.
We're talking about those negative looping thoughts that just won't quit. And the research suggests this isn't just a minor annoyance. For many of us, up to 80% of our daily thoughts may lean negative.
80%.
That number is huge. We often feel, overwhelmed by it, paralyzed by the repetition, or just totally stuck in that cycle.
And then that feeling of being stuck,
Mm.
it isn't just psychological. It's actually a neurobiological state. It reflects real physical patterns happening in your nervous system.
Okay.
So our mission today is to uncover those precise biological mechanisms, the literal pathways that let you quickly gain some distance and some emotional control. We pulled sources from all over, from clinical frameworks like acceptance and commitment therapy, to fMRI scans, to physiological studies on cortisol and the vagus nerve.
Right. So we're doing a deep dive into the science of mental freedom. And what we found running through all of this material is this capacity for what clinicians call non-identification.
Or, more simply, just unhooking yourself from your thoughts.
Exactly. And this isn't just mind over matter. This is brain over body and body over brain. So let's start with something surprisingly simple and really actionable.
Okay.
Using your breath to immediately regulate your entire internal state.
Absolutely. What's so critical here is that before we can even ask the high-level parts of the brain to step in, we have to quiet the alarm bells that are ringing through the body. The body is always, always the starting point for resilience.
Okay, let's unpack this then, starting with the vagus nerve. I know it's key to stress regulation, but what is this? This major highway, what is it doing biologically when we're looping on stressful thoughts?
We'll think of the vagus nerve as the longest cranial nerve in your body. It's this massive communication highway connecting your brainstem directly to your heart, your lungs, and your gut. It's a primary director of the rest and digest system. So during those stressful moments when we feel hooked by anxiety, the vagus nerve is usually getting signals that keep the body stuck in high gear.
The fight or flight mode.
Exactly. Fight or flight.
So when our mind is racing, our vagus nerve is essentially bottlenecked. It's preventing those relaxation signals from even getting through.
That's a perfect way to put it. A vagus nerve reset helps shift the body back toward that balanced, relaxed state by directly regulating your heart and breathing.
Yeah.
This is just a foundational step. You really can't think your way out of a physiological response.
So how do we hit that internal brake? Our sources pointed to two simple, really well-supported ways to do this. The first is intentional breathing.
Right.
You want to inhale slowly for about 4 seconds, but then, and this is the critical part, you exhale for 6 seconds.
That longer exhale is the secret sauce.
Yeah.
It really is. When the duration of the exhale is longer than the inhale, it sends a very specific signal to the vagus nerve that says, I am safe, the danger has passed.
And that has a direct effect.
An immediate one. It lowers your heart rate variability and directly reduces the circulating levels of cortisol, the main stress hormone. It's a chemical reduction, just through mechanics.
It's still kind of hard to believe a few seconds of controlled breath can literally change your cortisol levels. I mean, that's an incredible lever we all have.
It is. And the second actionable method is moderate movement. The research suggests that consistent activity, like, walking, swimming, or cycling, promotes what's called autonomic balance.
It keeps the channels open.
It keeps the channels open, helping the body shift efficiently between that high alert state and the calming state, which is just vital for long-term cardiovascular health.
And the overall benefits of having good vagal tone are huge. We're talking regulating emotions, lowering blood pressure, better digestion and sleep, and even reducing systemic inflammation. It's a full system tune-up, all starting right there in the body.
Okay, so now we can shift from the body's emergency brake to the mind's operation. Once we've calmed that physical alarm, how do we deal with the overwhelming thoughts themselves? This is where we need that core psychological skill known as cognitive diffusion.
I think I get the term unhooking intuitively, but for our listener, how do the scientific frameworks actually define diffusion or decentering? Is it just, wishing the thoughts away?
Not at all. Diffusion is about cultivating the skill to just observe your thoughts without getting entangled in them. It's allowing them to come and go without treating them as absolute fact.
Or like instructions you have to follow.
Exactly. Or needing to argue with them. You're just perceiving them as mental events rather than fundamental truths about you. And this skill is so important because when negative thoughts are fused with your self-concept, when you believe I'm a failure instead of I'm having a thought that I might fail, that fusion is what really drives anxiety and depression.
So what's in the practical toolkit? How do we create that separation?
There are several really solid science-backed techniques. One of the simplest is just labeling or naming. So when a critical thought pops up, say, I'm going to mess this up, you simply label the process. You say to yourself, I notice that I'm having a thought about self-doubt.
So that simple act acknowledges it, but it places it one step away from your core identity. It just strips it of its power.
It does. It really does. Another powerful method is something called the language trick, or deliteralization. This technique involves rapidly repeating a distressing word or a phrase like the word worthless over and over until it loses its meaning.
Until it just becomes a sound.
It just becomes a sound. Experimental evaluations of this showed it dramatically reduces both the discomfort and the believability of negative thoughts. You short-circuit the emotional response by breaking the word's association with its meaning.
And a third method uses physical or conceptual separation. This is where you get those classic mindfulness metaphors, right? Thoughts as clouds in the sky, or passengers on a bus you don't have to follow.
And this extends to more physical actions, too, specifically expressive writing. The technique involves physically writing down distressing thoughts. And then, this is the key, destroying the paper.
Shredding it, crumpling it, burning it.
Right. That physical act creates a cognitive space between you and the thought on the paper. Your brain associates that physical detachment, vision and touch, with a break in the neurological circuit that links the thought to who you are. You're physically detouring the circuit.
That's fascinating, especially when we look at applications outside of typical anxiety. Our sources pointed out that diffusion is remarkably effective with chronic pain.
That's right. For people experiencing chronic pain, diffusion is really effective at uncoupling the sensory intensity of the pain, the raw physical feeling, from its affective unpleasantness.
The emotional distress about the feeling.
Exactly. It suggests that unhooking from the sensation itself is more central to long-term pain regulation than just trying to reduce the negative thoughts about it.
And this skill is already leaping into the 21st century. I was really surprised by the VR research.
Oh, the virtual reality cognitive diffusion apps are a powerful modern tool. One study found them really feasible for young people with depression and anxiety.
So what does that look like?
In the VR environment, your thoughts are represented as animated objects or text, and you can customize them, you can interact with them, and you can literally pop them or throw them away.
In these virtual settings, like a classroom or a train, it makes that mental separation so interactive and tangible.
It really does.
So we know the body has the vagus nerve to throttle down, and the mind has the skill of diffusion, but how does the brain actually translate that mental skill into physics? If unhooking is the skill, what parts of the brain are actually responsible? Where is the neural switchboard?
This is where we get into the anatomy of rumination. It involves three major networks. First, you've got the hook, that's the default mode network, or DMN.
Okay, the DMN.
This network is highly active when you're resting, planning, or just thinking about yourself.
So if we are hooked and our mind is wandering or we're ruminating, the DMN is basically running the show.
Precisely. Increased, persistent DMN activity is directly linked to that emotionally charged, self-focused rumination. It's a core symptom of depression.
Then there's the switch. The salience network, or SN, tell us about its role as the gatekeeper here.
The salience network is centered in the anterior insula and the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. It basically acts as the switchboard manager.
Okay.
Its job is to monitor all the information coming in, internal, like a sudden fear, and external, like a loud noise, and detect what's important, what's salient. Then it decides which brain resources to activate.
So it's managing the traffic between the DMN, our internal world, and the parts of our brain focused on external tasks.
Yes, the central executive network.
Okay, so the SN detects the emergency and decides, do we keep running the internal DMN movie, or do we switch over to external focus? How do these two networks need to interact for us to function well?
For successful focused cognition, you need what's called anti-correlated coupling between the salience network and the default mode network. Think of it like a sound engineer managing two tracks. When one track, the DMN, your internal thoughts, is active, the other track, your external focus, must be suppressed.
Right, because if the SN doesn't switch the DMN off, you're trying to concentrate on the world while your internal thoughts are still screaming in the background.
That's it, exactly. Poor cognitive performance is associated with dysfunctional coupling, meaning the SN and DMN are chatting way too much. If you're trying to parallel park, the SN needs to turn off the self-critical DMN so you can focus. Unhooking is the physical act of optimizing that negative correlation.
And finally, we have the governor, the prefrontal cortex, or PFC. What's its relationship to the emotional alarms?
So the PFC, specifically the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex, exerts top-down control. And its main target is the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm center. That connection between them is robust and very measurable.
And the research gives us clear evidence of this control, doesn't it?
It does. Research on affect labeling, just the simple act of putting a strong feeling into words, shows that it literally decreases amygdala activity while at the same time increasing activity in the VLPFC.
So labeling your emotion actually engages the governor?
Yes, the PFC's job is literally to tell your emotional alarm to regulate itself.
What's also important is how this circuitry looks different in different conditions. We see that anxiety is linked to reduced resting connectivity between the amygdala and the PFC. The alarm and the governor are poorly connected.
Leading to hyperreactivity.
Huh?
But fascinatingly, depression is associated with increased connectivity in that same area.
Which seems counterintuitive.
It does, but it's interpreted as reflecting the overconnection of those rumination circuits. The negative internal loop is just constantly feeding itself. It's an overconnection that leads to entrapment, not control.
And this wiring can start really early. There was a critical finding about childhood stress, too.
Oh, the long-term impact is profound. We found sources showing that higher cortisol levels in childhood are negatively correlated with that amygdala PFC connectivity 14 years later.
Wow, 14 years.
Meaning early, chronic stress can structurally weaken the connections that control emotion well into adulthood. And the study noted this effect was largely specific to females, which really highlights the need for stress management strategies early in life.
So knowing all this, we see the goal isn't just about quick fixes. It's about long-term structural change. It's about cultivating the garden, permanently rewiring our resilience through neuroplasticity.
Right. Neuroplasticity is the brain's amazing ability to reorganize its physical structure and function based on experience. It's use-dependent. Every single time you consciously choose self-regulation, every time you choose to unhook, you are exercising and strengthening those circuits between your PFC and your limbic system.
And we have tangible evidence of this rewiring. The sources noted that mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR, programs induce measurable changes in just 8 weeks.
It's remarkably fast. We see increased volume and activity in the prefrontal cortex, your governor, the insula, which is part of that SN switchboard, and the hippocampus. And crucially, at the same time, we see decreased amygdala activity.
The brain is literally being physically reshaped by consistent attention. And this extends to even the most complex emotional processes we manage, like forgiveness.
That's a critical finding. Repeated acts of forgiveness, actually processing and releasing an injury, that strengthens those prefrontal limbic connections and reduces amygdala reactivity over time. The physiological benefits are incredibly stark.
So practicing forgiveness reduces chronic stress.
Significantly. In contrast, rumination, which is the hallmark of unforgiveness, is associated with dramatically increased cortisol levels.
And that chronic cortisol is what leads to all sorts of other health problems.
It is. It leads to dysregulated stress responses, which are implicated in everything from metabolic dysfunction to cardiovascular disease. Choosing to let go, choosing to unhook from that story of injury is one of the most powerful self-regulatory acts you can do for your long-term physical health.
So whether we're talking about focused breathing or cognitive diffusion or the profound choice of forgiveness, all these practices reinforce new, resilient neural pathways. They let your mind naturally lean toward more positive, intentional thought patterns.
So to synthesize the core learning points for you, the vagus nerve is the physiological throttle. Defusion is the mental skill to separate yourself from your thoughts. The salience network is the brain's switch. And consistent practice, like MBSR or forgiveness, physically rewires the control centers in your prefrontal cortex and amygdala.
But to leave you with a final thought, we have to address the modern environment we live in. Our sources point out that our current digital climate, which is so often characterized by public condemnation, it actively rewards unforgiveness over dialogue.
It really does. This corrosive atmosphere makes unforgiveness common and replaces genuine empathy with rapid judgment of these abstract others, creating measurable chronic strain on us.
So consider this. Neuroscience confirms that unforgiveness creates real chronic strain on your body and mind. It increases cortisol, it heightens amygdala activity. And philosophically, genuine empathy requires vulnerability and often face-to-face contact.
So given that, how did the digital habits we form, The judging and isolating of people we only know abstractly, how does that negatively shape our physical brain structure? The continuous conscious practice of unhooking may be the only way to counteract the brain's subconscious wiring toward digital outrage and secure your own real-world capacity for peace and resilience.